Okay, so hello everybody, and thank you for coming to the VSU College of Humanities and Social Sciences seminar series. This is our second presentation we'll have today, and then we'll have a little break over the summer and resume again in the fall. And so what we're hoping with this series is not just have presentations from faculty members, but to have more presentations like we're having today, where we have, a faculty member, a student, and a representative from the community. So if you're from a community organization today, so thank you to coming from our City of Valdosta, Lowndes County, and City of Fitzgerald folks. And if you would like to think not just about, networking and making connections and seeing how VSU can serve you with this presentation, but also thinking about ways in which you might like to present on a topic in the future, that'd be something to think about as well. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenters in just a minute. We have Joe Robbins, Brandy Dame, and Tracy Washington today, and they're talking about partnering for possibilities, Adel's downtown development, and the political science capstone experience.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Price. It is a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. And I want to start off by saying that learning can occur anywhere. And obviously, given the nature of our presentation today, most of our conversation will be focused on Adel. But really the idea behind this is one that maybe started at another local place, and that's Georgia Beer Company, right? So Dr. Lee was there, and he's here. He's been a big help throughout this project. Dean LaPlante, who's not with us today, he was there, and also Daryl Moore. So I wanted to make sure up front that we gave proper recognition and thanks also to Dr. Lee and Daryl Moore, the director for the South Georgia Center for Regional Impact. And really, as we get started with this, Dr. Lee and I have talked a lot about some of the challenges with the traditional political science capstone course. And in a nutshell, the course is kind of stale because the way Dr. Lee and I came up through our respective undergraduate programs is you write a research paper that may or may not be helpful for your field of study. And you may write this research paper that, I'm sad to say, no one besides the professor would read, and it would have very little impact beyond your class, right? And maybe some of this was tainted by my experience teaching capstone here before, which was the COVID spring, right? So I literally taught the class in the middle of a global pandemic, and you can understand how that's likely to kind of tarnish one's feeling on a class like that. But eager to chart a new path forward, Dr. Lee and I set out to kind of rethink how we're doing this. And we came up with this idea, and it started out with kind of a choose your own adventure course, where for those students who maybe needed that research paper, they could go down that path. For those students that wanted to kind of embark on their own journey, we offered them this experiential learning opportunity, and that's really the focus of today's conversation. So the motivation was to give students a very different approach to maybe exercise some creativity, some of their innovative nature, and then also to maybe think about how they can get connected with the community. I mean, something we had talked about a few minutes ago is how a lot of these communities are looking for ways to kind of keep folks, young people especially, connected to the community and living in some of these areas too. So this was a really important way for us to make that possible. And thankfully, some representatives from Adel were interested in this as well. So with that, I thought we would give Brandy a chance to maybe talk a little bit about the Adel perspective, and then really the heavy lifting here gets left with Tracy, who's going to talk us through what the students found in this really impressive journey. So Brandy, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Adel never had a Main Street program, and so the DDA went to the city council and the mayor and asked if they could have someone that was the downtown development director, and then the city did approve for there to be hired for the, but they said you have to become classic to do that. So the person has to do that, and then they wanted a work plan to be done. And so we met with Daryl Moore, all of us. Randy Lane is the community development director, the mayor, some city council members, our economic development director, which is Lisa Collins, and John Flythe, who was our city manager. We met with Daryl, and we were just explaining that we needed a work plan, we needed a master plan, because there's a lot of blind. And we needed to attract tourism as well as businesses. When I was hired June 1st, 2018. There were over 28% of empty buildings, very blighted. And in the interview, they asked, well, what do you think about our downtown? What's your first impression? Well, there was business owners in the interview process with me, so I didn't want to hurt their feelings, but I didn't want to say anything bad, so I just kind of went down like this, and I go, it's okay. Of course, Adel needed a lot of work. We needed the depot parking lot. There needed to be more events. Anything that we wanted to attract people for tourism, as well as we wanted business owners to come. I'm now the Main Street Director in downtown Valdosta, and when I left, we went from 28% buildings of being empty and blight to less than 4% now. And towards the end, when I was leaving, I was getting calls almost every week of what buildings were available to rent or lease. So it has gotten a lot better, thank goodness. But Daryl suggested talking to VSU. So Randy Lane and I went to VSU, and we spoke to the class, and we just kind of told them our needs and our wants. And basically I asked, well, raise your hand first if you've ever been to downtown Adel. Hardly anybody raised their hands because they were young. So I basically said, we want fresh eyes. I want you to go to downtown Adel and look to see what we can get young people and older up to downtown Adel. What would be the things that would get you there? And of course, lots of restaurants, of course, shopping, affordable shopping. Now, antiques is a popular thing for downtown Adel. We do have a thrift store there, and it gets lots of businesses. A coffee shop. We had a coffee shop added a couple of years ago, and that's brought lots of businesses. And they've actually expanded and bought 3 more buildings because they have become so popular. So it was great to see what their vision was about to graduate from college. Not just, and I even said, I know I'm 28, and I joked with them. I said, no, I'm about to be 44, so I can get the families here, but I need to see it through your eyes. And they came up with great Capstone projects. A lot of social media, of course. They said that TikTok would be great. We gave them a tour of downtown Adel, and I would point, we need this to be worked on. Georgia Main Street suggests alleyways to be redone. And I said, look at downtown Valdosta, what they have done with their alleys with the murals. Murals is very popular, and there's an ordinance against murals in downtown Valdosta, and we were trying to get that changed because you can, do hashtag downtown Valdosta, and you can see all the social media posts, and it's like this weekend was Lowndes Prom, and a lot of them I saw on social media over and over and over were posting in front of the murals, and that was also suggested. So they had some great ideas for downtown Valdosta.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll hand it off to Tracy next. But before we get into that, one of the things that I want to stress is just how wide-ranging the skills needed to pull this off were. And in traditional capstone class, you may run some regression analyses, you may write a case study. But in the case of Tracy's group and one of the other groups, it was much more than that. They had to wrestle with literature that they may not be familiar with. In some cases, this is literature dealing with public administration. Sometimes this was economic planning literature. But beyond that, they also spent a lot of time doing kind of quasi-field research. As Brandy said, we met with Brandy and Randy and the mayor a couple of times. But then they also were going and visiting businesses and kind of touring the cities themselves. And then they also went and looked at other locations too to help come up with other ideas. And we already had talked about Valdosta and Lowndes, but Douglas was another community that we discussed a lot. So it really kind of got them thinking outside the box and developing not only a deeper appreciation for content and communities, but also adding new skills to their toolbox, so to speak. So with that, Tracy, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, let's start by saying that we were fortunate to work with Brandy. She made her goals and her vision for Adel pretty clear. The first step, we needed to listen to her. We needed to listen to the city of Adel officials to see what their plans were and what they wanted. The next step, as a group, both groups, we decided to go to Adel to interact with the locals and the business owners to get a local feel of what they wanted. So we made some proposals, both groups did. So if you can.
Yep, ready?
Okay, so one of the things Brandy mentioned when she met with with us as Valdosta State students is that there was a significant amount of underutilized land. There is also a decline in their population as many of the younger people are moving out to seek jobs elsewhere because there's not much of a job market there. So we wanted to focus on the underutilized land by suggesting to add green space because they actually downtown, it's really beautiful. They do have a lot of areas that has potential to be green space. So the left-hand corner you see that we suggested adding like a pavilion and tables for the reason that she wants to have concerts, live concerts. There's also events that do occur in downtown Adel currently. There's Food Truck Fridays that happens like first Friday of every month.
Second Friday.
Second Friday. That's why I went down there. So second Friday of every month. The locals there are so friendly. But adding the picnic tables and the pavilion will allow more people to want to, locate downtown and just, interact with each other. One group suggested, revamping their lights and adding different light posts there to just kind of give a facelift to the downtown area. We suggested, because we had to research city ordinance, there's a lot of restrictions there, such as adding paint. So we suggested with the sidewalk art, which is aesthetically pleasing, to bring people there to add temporary paint. Our paint that shows up only when it rains. We had to research brands that actually did that. Forever Wet or Ready Wet is one of the brands. It's affordable. We also had to take into account the budget that the city of Adel had. With a small town, the consequences of that is you're not going to have a large budget to work with. So some of our research, we had to find cost-effective things that they could do. We also suggested with adding murals, the temporary ones where it's not, going against the city ordinance, there's vinyl that's temporary, where you can put up and you can peel off, and you can as the season change, you can add something else there, and it's not permanent. And they're also the city of daylilies. So we wanted to, match a theme for that by putting more daylilies, like planting more, like trees and flowers in areas, like on the sidewalks to make it appealing to walk in those areas. For the underutilized buildings, which you mentioned, during that time there was so much of a more percentage of buildings not being used, but since is reduced quite a bit. We suggested to add pop-up shops, revamp them. There are grants to revamp buildings. There's land banks where the government comes in and make deals with the owners to revamp a building, to turn it into something totally different. Adding pop-up shops where local artists want to rent the building for a week or two or a month, would increase the downtown economy. Also, they had a few large buildings like Goodies and Fred's. We talked to the locals there, and there was not much there to do, so they suggested a movie theater or a bowling alley. Well, with COVID, I don't think the movie theater business is doing so great. So we suggested to add a bowling alley. All the locals thought that was a great idea. We also suggested adding a farmers market because they have all this space in the depot area where locals, like people want to come in and buy fresh food, which is always trending. So, okay, next slide. The biggest thing is that, you know, like Randy said, no one really knows where Adel is or about Adel. So we decided, okay, to use social media. Like it's one video can make any person or any location trend. It also has the ability to increase revenue to a certain location once the word gets out. Like, hey, you know, we have different shops here. We have something artistic to offer. So, you know, for a certain generation of people, there's Facebook, and for the rest of the generation that's younger, there's Instagram and TikTok. So, like, a lot of the shop owners were interested in learning how to do, like, reels on TikTok and different, like, little stories on Instagram to bring awareness. We also came up with a slogan for Adel, like hashtag a day in Adel. So, that's pretty much it, I think.
Okay.
Do I have another slide? or
No,
is that- okay.
no, unless you want to do the final.
No.
So I think, as we said, as I said at the beginning, learning can occur anywhere, and I think it truly has in this case, because a number of the students in the two groups were actually from Atlanta, and so it gave us this interesting cross-pollination opportunity where our students who were up, you know, from a little further north had a chance to kind of learn more about Cook County and Adel. But then it also kind of gave them this opportunity to cast, as Brandy said, fresh eyes on Adel and to think about some new opportunities. And so for all of the research and conversation we had, it was interesting that when we actually did the presentation, that I think that last slide about social media probably garnered the most audience feedback. But just in closing, some of the key outcomes from this project. First and foremost, we helped to come up with a number of growth strategies that, you know, really forced our students to kind of think about what it's like to be a consultant. And so in that case, what we mean is they really had to met with local officials, our community partners, and they listened to them. And I think what I found really interesting about this project is how the strategies and recommendations evolved. So it went from my initial selection or suggestion, which is, well, just put a Buc-ee's there because Buc-ee's fixes everything. You know, where we went from this silly idea of like one business or one type of store will fix everything to much broader growth strategies that are rooted in practices adopted by other communities. And I think this is really going to be the way forward for a lot of these communities like Adel. So that was the first outcome. Secondly, I think it got students thinking about political science, about their major, and also about public administration in very concrete, tangible ways that, you know, maybe that dusty old conventional Capstone model just doesn't really get at, right? And I'm guilty of that because that's kind of most of my research, sadly. And then finally, it helped us to develop a better understanding of this, you know, towns in our region. I, for one, will say that a good chunk of our Christmas shopping budget actually came from patronizing Adel businesses. Anytime, you know, I'm in the area, I always hit up the coffee shop. Dr. Lee and I, you know, have had a couple of trips up there where we hit the restaurants up there. And, you know, we'll make those trips now that we know more about these communities. And I know Tracy and some of her peers have said the same thing about this. And I think there's some benefit to that as well. And then lastly, it's just, I think it shows the power and the potential of having these relationships between students in various classes and also our community partners. And as we talked about before, I'm hoping this is something we can continue. With that said, we're happy to answer any questions that the audience may have. So. Maybe that was too abrupt.
I will say I did
Sorry.
a presentation for Cook High School about the Main Street Way, and I was so excited because I thought they were really into it. And I said, does anybody have any questions? And I got one. And I was like, yes, how much you make? I said, go to the website, that's public information. So, any questions?
All right, so Brandy set the bar at 2 questions. So we got handouts too. We had the presentations bound, and I thought maybe I could just pass these to the audience if you wanted to take a look at it.
actually from Douglas, so I'm curious what you guys drew from Douglas, because I know you mentioned that's something that was discussed a lot for Adel. Because I know to me that's a really small town. I grew up there. I was like, this was boring. I gotta get out of here.
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm curious what you guys went and saw there.
Well, the person who lives in Douglas, she's from Douglas. Her name is Nita Gamble. There's a caboose there in Douglas that you guys have, and they renovated it where it includes a stage and lights, and to draw people downtown with live concerts. So because she had experience there, and also you guys have pop-up shops. May not be what you want to do, but your mom or some of her friends may really love going to do pop-up shops, doing Christmas shopping, or just getting out of the house. But the actual shops did increase the economy there at Douglas. The interesting thing is working with the two groups. We were all together, even though we were divided as two groups. We all bounced ideas off each other. So that's what we took from Douglas.
One of the things I would say to follow up, and this is kind of one of those interesting kind of spillover developments that will happen too. As Tracy was saying, different. Now Tracy's lives in Thomasville, so and actually Eric and Wyatt just some interesting developments. They're actually doing applied learning project in Thomasville this semester from the current Capstone class. But anyway, Tracy would pull some experiences and knowledge from Thomasville, but Nita did that with Douglas. And towards the end, and she had gone to the local officials a few times, but towards the end of this, they had actually even offered her a job in that particular line of work. So I think, as much as we all do, department heads, program coordinators, faculty do these open houses, as much as we like to think we connect with students, the moms and dads and family are always asking about job prospects, right? So it gave me an opportunity to say, well, hey, look, our students are engaged in applied research, and we even had students being offered jobs as a result of this. So I think that was an interesting development from that also.
I'm going to give you your second question.
But me
We're going to hit that bar. First, fascinating. This is wonderful. And Tracy, I have you on my courses, so I didn't even know this was part of the project you were doing, so really amazing. So my thoughts are, Adel, and maybe you addressed this at the very beginning, I came in about 2 minutes late. I'm predominantly maybe an older generation of folks who reside in that area. Did you guys find any discrepancies or concerns with the current population wanting to keep it, like we don't want change, like we like this quiet, traditional Southern approach? Bringing things like this in, growth strategies could potentially be scary or concerning. How did you deal with some of those anxieties?
Okay, surprisingly, the reason the population in Adel is a little bit older is because the people that's younger, because of lack of job growth, they move. Because it's close to Tifton and Valdosta, most of the younger people come to Valdosta and they're like, I'm out of here. But surprisingly, the older generation wanted change. They wanted the fresh bodies, the younger people. They were on board. One of the people that I talked to, one of the owners, M&E Wings, hey, there's so much.
It's my favorite.
Oh my God, I gained 15 pounds. But, and that's where a lot of people would go after church, and I would go there and just talk to the locals. They were on board with, revitalizing it. Half the population didn't want it to stay the same. They wanted to be part of the community. They wanted to have stuff for everybody, to meet downtown, just to be, to interact and be a part of their community. We found that more important than just being stuck in, traditional, whatever it's called, just the traditional mindset of the downtown area.
And I think, Brandy, that was something you had talked about from the start. I don't know if you mentioned, I think steakhouses were that was an idea you had mentioned. I don't know if you want to add it.
There is a building that was a bank, but then it was turned into a funeral home in downtown Adel, and it's been for sale for a long time. And the reason why they said they haven't bought it is because the asking price is a little bit too much. But I really wanted a steak place there, and we came up with the name To Die For.
Oh my God.
So I'm hoping that will come true one day.
It's so funny.
It'll be a beautiful downtown. But to go with what you said, when I first started there, and I'm from Valdosta, I moved to Adel because of the job. So I was one of the few people that actually moved to Adel because of the job and took my daughter out of Lowndes County schools and put her in Cook, and she's been thriving there ever since. Now I got to move back to Valdosta, which I'll definitely do in a couple of years. But a lot of older folks would say, well, we've always done it that way. And I would say, okay, quit saying that. You've got to progress with the future or you're going to die, and you are dying. And this has got to be a thriving downtown. And I mean, every time you would meet someone, well, we've always done it that way. And I finally said, I don't care. I was hired to revitalize. We've got to revitalize downtown Adel, or you're just going to keep losing people. One of the principals of Cook High School, I was in Leadership Cook with him, and he would always say that when he gave a speech when they were graduating high school is, please come back. We know you're going to leave and go to VSU or UGA or Georgia Southern, but please come back. We want you to come back. Try to find a job. Please raise your families here. And that's how, we would always say we want the younger generation to come back to their home because we want Adel to grow and grow. One of the board members would say, little old Adel, and I would just go, and the board meeting, I said, please quit saying little old Adel. We're Adel, and we're gonna thrive. That's what it's for. So,
were you able to find a bridge between preserving the Adel tradition or the Adel, like some of their milestone areas, but still being able to incorporate for some of these folks who are saying little old Adel, that progress wasn't necessarily taking away their heritage or their town? Was there a happy medium with that? Or?
it was eventually, and they got real excited about it when we would say, look what we're doing here. They would get excited about that, and they, instead of saying, well, it used to be this way, that they would say, what's next? Yeah. And so, like she said, that you just had to change them, and we think we changed some of them.
That explains why they were so eager to change.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's some interesting things, and I mean, we could talk about this a lot, but I think to your question too, one of their proposals that I think really speaks to this question is a couple slides in here where we had a number of conversations and discussions with some of these officials, and they frequently, probably almost every single time, mentioned about how agriculture is the backbone, right? And so one of the groups came up with, well, they have some vacant spaces. People like fresh vegetables. I mean, people will pay through the nose for overpriced tomatoes, right? But this is a nice way to kind of embrace one of this kind of legacy characteristics, right? But do so in a way that supports something that's already a strength, but does so in a way that could maybe kind of propel that further, right? And then as Brandy said, there are also some interesting developments there. The motor park, the speedway there is massive. I mean, it has a massive drawing. And then also, I didn't know this until we made our first trek up there, but there is a huge crypto business operating outside of Adel too, because they have an energy surplus, if I'm saying that right. Right, so it is this kind of blend of kind of new, innovative opportunities, but also still kind of embracing their identity.
And a lot of people, like especially now with gas prices are going up, we would always try to say, take a staycation to downtown Adel, because we also had Reed Bingham Park. And we also were, with the racetrack, we met with the racetrack owners, and we were like, how can we get them to come to Adel and to shop? And so we would market to them, please come to downtown Adel, because the owners would say, and also because we didn't have enough hotels, that they would go to Valdosta or Tipton. And most of people, and they were like, well, they got to eat, they want to go to a restaurant. You have one restaurant downtown. So we really, really, really needed more restaurants. That's a big problem in Adel as a whole, is there are not a lot of restaurants. They say that they'll go out of business, but I rode yesterday to grab something to eat and had to keep driving around because the cars were wrapped all the way to the road. So there is a need for more restaurants, for sure. I want to go back to a couple other slides. That over there with the scarecrows, that was my office. And they didn't really decorate until we became a main street. And so we came up with themes for them to decorate. And there was a particular business owner that didn't want to partay with the rest of the folks. And I was like, okay, you're going to see that people are going to get on this train and they want their business to grow. And decorations really, people like taking pictures in front of decorations. And you could see that he was reluctant, but I'm like, okay, if you don't get on the train, then you'll be left. And eventually, he had that snowman in that window with that Christmas tree every night, and he also decorated for fall. So just, just stuff like that. With small changes ends up making big changes. And the banners, when I arrived, they were very outdated, very faded. I said, first thing, aesthetics. Let's make stuff appealing. If we can't have murals, let's bring temporary art. So I got with Cook High School Art Department and gave the first place winner $100, the second place $50, and they did a backdrop, and we placed that at M&E Wings for people to take pictures, and it was the high school people taking the pictures more than anybody, just like I had thought. So just stuff like that. The city manager did allow me to spend $5,000 on new banners, and so we ordered banners for every part of the season, and people were saying that downtown Adel in the fall looked like a Hallmark because we all had scarecrows and our mums and our hay and everything out. So just stuff like that made good changes. But that caboose is struggling still. We got price quotes on getting it repainted, and it's going to cost $45,000 because it is historic. So
Yeah, that was our nightmare. That caboose with the budget they had. We're like, okay, what can we do to that thing? It's actually really neat, but they could add a stage to it, and that's where you want to have live bands, and then it's right close to that, and have people come eat.
Other questions?
Is there a way to go back and, have maybe a capstone class in a couple of years and do some kind of evaluation research where you could look at the impact this has had?
Yeah, I think that's something we could certainly do. And, I had gone up there, I think earlier this semester with Brandy and met with Brandy and Randy. Dr. Lee was meeting with another community, so he wasn't able to join us. But we kind of talked about a follow-up. And I think from Randy's perspective, there absolutely was interest. And he's even expressed interest in maybe an intern. So we're certainly open to it for sure.
Maybe that steakhouse will be there.
That's right. That's right.
I wish. To die for.
Yeah, and I think we got two and a half questions maybe. So.
Thank y'all for asking more than the high school students. I appreciate that so much.
Well, I think, thank you everybody for coming. If you want to sort of stay around and talk, make sure you've made the connections you want to make with VSU, and I'm sure we'll hope to see you out at the seminar series in the fall. So we'll be sure to spread the word when these start back up again.
Thank you all.